Thank you, Dr. Wong, and greetings to all my fellow panelists. I think for the record, I'd just like to address the President of MCA, Dr. Wee Ka Xiang, um, Dr. Mustafa, my ex-former colleague in the Treasury, and Dr. Sri T. Lian Ke. Saudara-saudara sekalian, selamat pagi, selamat sejahtera. Now, I've been very impressed listening to all these very learned statements. And I'm surprised myself that independently, I came across a different perception or perspective in terms of the next plan. Now, I asked myself, what do we expect from the 12th plan? From the people's point of view, the public point of view, Rakyat's point of view, both urban and rural, what do we expect? We've had so many plans, 11 plans, and I've been involved with them from the beginning. We used to be part of an interagency group made up of EPU, Treasury, Bank Negara, and Ministry of Trade, and a few others. But the core group, we were involved in the interagency planning. And I recognize also that what has been said, we have been pretty good at plans and planning, but obviously we have not been able to deliver as much as we planned and promised. Unfortunately, in my career, I've been involved with serving many Malaysian Chinese ministers. I started from Colonel ASLI, Tung Tan Chu Sin, Tung Lin Yong Sek, and Dato Tan Sri Ong Ka Teng. And now I'm also working under Chinese boss, Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia of Sunway. So I think maybe I know a little bit of the Chinese mind. What goes in it, they say the inscrutable, but they're very pragmatic. Dato Sri Mustafa was also my colleague in the Treasury. He's very open, frank, and I'm so glad that if he cannot be in the Treasury, he's in EPU, because he's got a very deep insight into what went on in the past. And so I can feel free to be open and frank in this discussion with the chairman's permission. We have to be intellectually honest. I'm afraid a lot of people talk about a lot of things, constructive, critical, negative, but behind closed doors at cocktails and coffee shops. But the real issues, the feelings of the people are not sufficiently highlighted. So I'm grateful to INSAP for this discussion. So I asked myself, what do you hope to aspire and expect from the 12th plan? One thing is quite clear. Nobody can be against the whole objective, the whole goal of wanting a more peaceful, more united, more harmonious, more progressive, more equitable, and just society. And the 5-year plan, the 12th plan, should not be concerned purely with economics. It's a whole gamut of social well-being, the well-being of the country, of the nation. From the very first plan, we had this concept. The plan should achieve the overriding objective of national unity. Now, although we have come a long way since the early days, I'm afraid we still don't have national unity to the extent that we should. We don't have a fair society. There's this big gap between the rich and the poor, the widening gap, as previous speakers have touched upon. And we don't seem to be sufficiently committed to closing that gap. One big problem is actually the distortion of the new economic policy. And I don't think I heard anyone commenting on that, on the NEP, because we cannot carry on with the NEP. We're not talking about shared prosperity, but is that going to be another distortion of the NEP? The NEP was introduced by PM Prime Minister Tun Razak after the 1969 tragic riots. It aimed to eradicate poverty regardless of race. But over time, I think that concept of regardless of race seemed to fade away. And now, then the NEP, instead of, as earlier, being a source of strength and unity, is now become a source of disunity and polarization. Because people don't feel they benefit. The poor Malays feel they could have got much more, and are rightly so. The poor Chinese, Indians, Kharazan, Murut, and those from Sabah, others from Sabah, Sarawak, were left out. When Professor talking about one girl trying to tap into the internet from a treetop, I mean, it's ridiculous. But what are our politicians doing? What is the MCA doing, MIC doing, and AMNO doing, and now the new political parties doing? The same people rotating round and round, but the delivery seems to be static. The problem with the planning and proper implementation, I think, is this issue of exclusivity, this issue of non-inclusivity, this whole issue of secrecy. Let me tell you a little story to try and make my delivery more interesting. In 1969, when I come back from Harvard, I was asked to head the economic division. And I used to attend this interagency group planning the NEP, mainly by the Harvard Advisory Group. Somebody who's gone left us, so I won't mention his name. And the issue was going to be very skewed. I attended those meetings on behalf of the Treasury, on behalf of our country, Malik Marikan, and found that I was getting asthma for the first time in my life. That's because of the stress and the tension. They had projections on a working level indicating that there should be large unemployment among the non-Malays and no unemployment for the Malays. I got worried. I asked whether Tun Kyu Sin knew about it. His secretary, Tan Chai Men, said, I don't know. I said, better check because I am going for this meeting and not knowing whether my minister supports it. He told Tan Kyu Sin, and Tun Tan Kyu Sin called Tan Sri Chong and myself, what's all this about their new economic policy? Can you imagine the Minister of Finance not knowing about it? After that, of course, he insisted on being brief and softened it somewhat because there was some extreme ideas proposed at that time. Now, this cannot carry on. There's got to be more discussion. We need to know what really shared prosperity means. The poverty side we succeeded a great deal until the UN report, where we find we could have done much better. But on the restructuring side, we also came a long way with all the GLCs. They should be included. But there is a question of definition and quantum and doubt. And for that reason, I would propose there should be a full-scale study which is transparent, get even the World Bank or anybody else involved. Now on the topic, shared prosperity in the plan. What is it really? Is it going to be Robin Hood philosophy? Take from the rich and give to the poor and don't do anything else in between? Are we going to have the same ugly concepts of the NEP that emerged later on in the implementation adopted in the shared prosperity too? Is it going to be more ketuananship? Because the public, here again, there needs to be proper survey. Non-Malays generally don't feel confident about the future. A lot of Malays too feel with corruption, the rich get richer, and so they have no role to play, not much gain to get. So we ask ourselves again, is this what our founding fathers wanted? Tunku Abdul Rahman, Tun Razak, Tun Hussein Yaon. Everything went off quite well actually until the 1980s. We must ensure that in formulating this new plan, and especially in the implementation, there is no bias. If we are afraid of dominance of one race, whatever, can we have a quota system as an idea? Recently, the budget came out with allocation for 100 million for Indian, Malaysian, 170 or odd million for Chinese, Malaysian. Now, that is not on. We are all Malaysians, and all policies should apply equally to all. Otherwise, it looks as if it's a budget or the 5-year plan for only one race. That is not intended, and it shouldn't be the case. So what do we want when we talk about shared prosperity? We mean equal opportunities in education, in the public and civil services, private sector employment, land alienation, distribution, licenses, permits, contracts, university places, etc., etc. If we want the private sector to get more involved with getting Bhumi Putras, why don't we have, as another proposal, joint enterprises between multiracial, so that there are some incentives given for multiracial companies to operate, and we can learn from each other. Malays, the Chinese, the Indians, the Kadizans, the Muruks, learn from each other, because each one of us are blessed with special skills. We need to treat all Malaysians as equal. Otherwise we have more and more polarization. So let me summarize quickly. A lot of it has been said, so I won't repeat. But we must be much more competitive, meritocratic, and inclusive. Otherwise, you will have a sense of alienation and detachment from what government is doing. The police, the military must be more multiracial. People must have their confidence increased. Education, we all talk about it for a long time, but nothing really moves, and we must push. get the private sector to play a bigger role. People criticize the civil service for being bloated. True. But who created it? When you have a big public sector, you must staff the public sector. But if you let the private sector play a bigger role in education, health, infrastructure, right across the board, you can do much better. The Sabah Sarawak issues is deplorable. The Malaysian Agreement 63 should be reviewed in this plan, and they should be given a better deal. The disparity in incomes must be addressed. 17 goals, UN goals, must be embedded in the whole plan. And if you ask me what we really want, it's very simple. Sometimes we economists make it complicated, and politicians make it even more confused and complicated. But really, we just want a place under the sun, whether you're rich or poor, or race, this race, that religion. Thank God this is a blessed country. We've got all the resources that we need, but just that, as Gandhi said, God has given us enough for everybody's need, but for nobody's greed. And that's what's happened. You see, in the whole discussion, I didn't hear the word corruption, cronyism, wastage of public funds, racial intolerance, religious intolerance, because all this goes towards making what is Malaysia and what is a progressive, harmonious country. I'm afraid that we have a long way to go in that sense. And I hope the 5-year planners, they will incorporate issues that are not purely in terms of, I know what it used to be. You just put up a whole list of projects and see how much it is, whether you can afford it, and that's the plan. But the issue of structural change, moving from NEP to a more normal society with competition and safeguards to benefit the poor and the deprived and the underprivileged, that is what we really want. It may be too late for the APU and Dr. Sri Mustafa to change the plan, but some basic adjustments can be made before it's too late and it comes out again and implemented the same way. Finally, I would appeal that civil service be made more multiracial. When I joined the civil service in '59, that's a long time ago, we had a rough ratio of 4:1. 4 Malay or Bumiputera to 1 non-Malay. Today, I've lost count. I think it's an important issue because people feel empathetic to those they are serving if they come from a similar background. And so the plan can go one way, implementation go another way if you don't have good implementers and politicians who think economics and public welfare rather than their own personal gain and political advancement. With that, I say thank you very much. Terima kasih.